Hello there! Welcome to Fireside with Peter Adkison on Gen Con TV. I am Peter Adkison, my co-host is Beverly Marshall Sailing, and our guest today is Carol Monahan. So on this show, as you know, we go in search of untold stories behind your favorite games. And this season, the game that we are focusing on is Magic the Gathering. And our guest today has some stories that I'm really sure you have not heard. Welcome to Fireside, Carol.
Yay! Hi,
Peter. It's great to have you on our show.
Yeah. And did you need to say anything else, or are we good to go?
Yeah, you can talk now.
We're good to go.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I worked there from December 1993. I worked for you in the basement of your house for a couple of months.
In the basement days. The basement days, as we lovingly call them.
Yeah.
Yeah, throughout the 90s. Yeah, you were there throughout this whole period. Well, the period that Beverly and I were there, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So let's go back to before you were there.
Right.
Carol Monahan, pre-1993, or pre-hiring at Wizards. What was Carol Monahan doing in these days?
Well, me and my husband, James Ernest, had moved out to Seattle on a whim. Basically, we threw everything in the back of the 77 Chevy Impala and drove out to Seattle knowing nobody.
From where?
We were in St. Louis at that time.
Okay, St. Louis.
And since it was, we moved out in the winter of '89, and we didn't think the car would make it. We drove by way of Los Angeles to kind of avoid most of the mountains.
Also avoid mountains. I was saying, we don't think the car's going to make it that far. Let's go by LA. That'll work.
Nobody told us about the Siskiyous, so we had a bad shock.
Okay.
Oh, no.
We got to that fast, but we made it.
You made it.
We made it. And he was a professional juggler, and I was his assistant. And I was also, of course, a Kelly temporary services girl because we had to pay the rent somehow.
Now being an assistant juggler doing sort of like magic performance versus being a Kelly, which made you more qualified to work at Wizards of the Coast, do you think?
You know, I think actually it was a clever combination of both.
Oh, yes,
because
of course.
I was not an assistant juggler. I was a juggler's assistant. I was like Carol Merrill, you know? It's like, here's the props, pass the hat, get people to put money in the hat, right? That's a good skill.
Getting money from people is always a good skill.
That's good. And so why'd you come to Seattle though?
Well, at the time, I had worked as an accounts receivable clerk at a warranty company in St. Louis for a year or so, and it was terrible. It was awful. I hated that job. And I thought, you know, at the time I got that job, everyone was like, how fast can you type? And that was the only question they had for me. And I'm like, I have a college degree. I've been a veterinary assistant. I've been a research assistant. And you're asking me how fast I can type. I got to get out of this town.
Right.
James was in college. He was taking an engineering degree, and he was not really quite fitting in with that. He was doing okay grades-wise, but he was like, I don't know that this is my career path, really, because he was juggling to put himself through college, and so we thought, let's go somewhere cooler, somewhere more fun, somewhere where he was thinking about possibly even taking a drama degree.
So it wasn't because one of you had a job offer in Seattle. You guys just decided up and move to Seattle.
No, we just...
Actually, same for me. I got out of college and out in the boonies and decided I want to move to Seattle. So I feel you. Yeah.
And on the trip out, we stopped in Albuquerque with a friend, and he was like,
that might become useful
stay
later.
in Albuquerque. And we were like, it's nice, but we've heard Seattle's cooler, right? We got to LA, I had friends in LA, they're like, you should stay in LA. And we're like, the smog is making the sunset green.
Oh, no.
Because this was 1989. It was still very bad. And we thought, no, we've heard Seattle is just this really kind of cool place to be. We got to Portland, where we were staying with a friend of a friend, because we didn't know anybody in Portland either. And she's like, you should stay here in Portland. And I said, and I'm not making this up, it rains too much.
Oh, so moved to Seattle.
And I think it does actually rain more in Portland.
I think it does, but not by a lot.
Not by a lot,
with that.
right.
Yeah.
And then called up, friend of a friend of a friend in Seattle, and he said, oh, come on up, I'll help you look for apartments. And
okay, so how did this open the door into coming to Wizards of the Coast?
Well, the very first paying job James got after we got to town was doing the NorwestCon halftime entertainment.
Now, NorwestCon is a local to Seattle science fiction and fantasy convention, more of a literary convention, I think, than a gaming convention. Is that fair?
It has a gaming track.
Yeah, I know it has a gaming track, but that's,
It definitely had, the costumers and the artists and the writers.
A lot of art.
And, yeah.
Yes.
And so we met everybody who kind of went to Norwestcon, and
So you started making friends.
just making
there.
friends locally, and just meeting people who were kind of into the same stuff we were, because I played D&D all through college.
Nice.
And so we were just making those connections, and gradually over time I was working temp jobs, and I made friends with Kathy Ice, who was involved with, she was friends, and her brother was friends with folks at the company.
Kathy Ice, we eventually hired to work in our Wizards of the Coast book department. But I don't think she had that job yet, so she introduced you
to Dave Howell.
to David Howe. Okay,
Yeah.
so David Howe, which we have to get on our show at some point. David Howe he was a co-author with several of us for the Primal Order, which is a role-playing product we did before Magic the Gathering in 1992, and played a very important role in helping us get Magic published with the typesetting for Magic the Gathering. He has some stories about that.
I have a Dave Howell and typesetting story myself.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, help
You
us.
want to jump ahead?
Yeah. Well, let's.
We can jump over that I had invested in the company. That happened. Even though I had to use one of those $1,000 credit cards you get in the mail because you're a college graduate.
Okay, so how did you even know about the company and
Dave
decide?
had been trying to get me to come work for you.
Okay.
He was like, Carol, you're cool. You should come work with us. And I was like, you're publishing one role-playing book, and this other, I think you had the
Talislanta.
Talislanta, yeah.
Right.
I'm like, I don't know that you have something for me to do, and also at the time that no one was getting paid.
Yeah, that's true. There was there was that period.
There was that time,
Yeah,
so I was like, no, Dave, it's cool. It's a cool
Or
company.
then they got paid for a while, but then they didn't get paid again.
So I thought, no, maybe not at this time, but I did know, I was aware and knew what was going on, and so yes, we got invited to the party you threw to try and get investors.
Yes. So this is, I'll set that up a little bit. So in early 1993, Wizards of the Coast had been publishing RPGs for some time already, because we came out with Primal Order and Talislanta in 1992 in the summer. But they didn't do so well. The company was not taking off and having the financial power to invest in bringing Magic the Gathering to the market. So we had started a new company called Garfield Games to sell stock in Magic the Gathering. And so I do remember it was the spring of '93-ish. It was late enough. It was close enough to publication that we had a lot of art.
Yes.
And we realized that the art could be a great tool to sort of bringing to life, visualizing. Yes, this game really is going to happen. Look at this really cool art we had.
Well,
right?
and this is actually professional. This isn't just a thing we're doing in our basement, even though it is.
Even though we are in our basement. Yes. That's.
And I remember there were like panels set up with the art on them, and it was very well done, and the art was great. And
It was.
And I was like, yes, absolutely, I'm in.
And so you went up and.
So I went to the bank at the last possible moment, because you gave me a deadline for when the printer bill was coming in.
Okay.
And I went to the bank and said, I can get a cash advance for the whole balance on this, right? And they're like, yeah, you haven't used it. So I was like, give me $1,000 at whatever it was, 19.8%. This made me later a very motivated employee, I think. I was motivated to help in the success of the company, because that was very, very, very important.
And on behalf of all the shareholders in 1993, we thank you for your investment. Help make Magic the Gathering happen. Every little bit helped, because we never did have a really big investor. I mean, we kind of, John Jordan kind of filled that role, but it wasn't like somebody coming in and dropping a couple hundred
friends
grand.
and relatives
and
Yeah. Grassroots, baby.
That's right. Before there was Kickstarter, there was get some investors.
Okay, but you're still not hired yet.
I'm still not hired yet.
And there is.
I was coming to some of those Monday night management meetings, though.
Yes. Well, let's go back to when we met.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And we think that was the previous winter.
Yes.
I'm not quite sure.
Yeah.
It was at DreamCon.
We were comparing notes before the show. Like, when did that happen? Trying to get our chronology.
I'm not sure if it was 92 or 93. It was in there somewhere. But I was, aside from being like a Kelly girl and a juggler's assistant. I was also an artist, and I was also a model.
Right.
And I found my John Casablancas modeling certificate and with all my memorabilia. So, I'm a qualified model. And I had been modeling for some photographers and some artists, and I had I got to be a guest at DreamCon on the strength of being a model.
Right. Okay.
So I had access to the green room.
Nice.
So I was in the green room, and you were in the green room.
I was in the green room.
And I had my modeling portfolio, which I was very happy to show off to all and sundry. And it did indeed have some very artistic, tasteful nudes in it.
It did.
Which
Yes.
I think probably was just making an impression on people. I think people remembered me after that.
But that house, but you came up and said, "Look at my art."
Yeah. I was
you
like,
had
"Look,
art
I have
in-
my
in-
por-
in
yeah,
the
I had
same
the
por-
art,
in
and I
the
had
same
my
portfolio.
that's also my modeling portfolio.
Yeah, and I was flipping through the art, and I remember you I got to a certain page, and I remember you kind of had like this, I don't know if you should continue or not, but then you kind of gave me the okay.
And it's like, yeah,
oh,
sure.
yeah.
Sure, yeah, that's
okay,
me.
That's
That's
you. Yeah.
But they were these very nice, soft,
For the
focused,
record, by the way, that is
draped in
that is
gauze.
not a story I ever tell.
I know, he's being very tasteful here, and I'm not.
Oh no, I'd be delighted to have
yeah,
you tell
yeah,
that. That's fine. But
Yeah, most of them I think I'm draped in gauze, and the gauze, hilariously, was aluminum polishing cloths from like a Boeing mechanic shop somewhere. Because the photographer was like, "Here, I've got gauze. Let's."
Yeah.
Very low budget art scene in Seattle
So
at the
after
time.
this, sometime after this moment,
Yes.
you got hired, but it was a respectful distant later.
It was a lot longer.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
had
And
come
it wasn't for modeling.
It wasn't for
No, it
modeling.
wasn't. And I know that James performed at a company picnic the
Right.
summer of '93 as well.
Yeah.
Because
yeah.
that was a thing. I remember coming down to the house for that, and then coming down for those sort of open to people involved with the company
And,
Monday
and
night
the
meetings.
house, by the way, in for the first couple of years of Wizards of the Coast existence, well, after the first few really embryonic months where we moved around like we're in apartments, there was about a 2, maybe 3 year stretch before Magic came out and had been out long enough that we'd accumulated enough money to move into a proper office.
Yeah.
We were in the basement of my house that I was renting in Renton, and that was.
Was it in Renton or was it in Kent?
was-
Kent, sorry.
it was
you're
off
right.
Because I
Military
remember
Road.
it took
I
me an
remember
hour
there
and a
was the
half on the
military
bus to
road,
get there, so it was not Renton.
Yeah, it was Kent. Yes,
It was
yes.
quite a ways down there.
See the memory thing again. Okay, so
And I met
Arab-
the UK office people. They came in for a meeting in the fall.
Oh.
And that's when I met them. It was at one of those Monday night meetings.
but you did some work on Arabian Nights.
Yes,
with
I did.
David Howe.
And
Let's jump to that.
Let's jump to that.
Yes.
So I get a call from Dave Howell on a Friday evening, and I'm trying to think how late this could have been, but it was absolutely the last moment when the films could get to Belgium and still make the print window.
Okay.
And he had been at the Film Bureau 24 hours a day all week. And they were open 24 hours a day during the week, but not on the weekend. So they were booting him out. And there had been various technical problems, I think corrupted art files and problems with getting like the printout and the words weren't on the right card. And I think we could go into, if you have not covered this already, the way typesetting worked. Because what you would see on the screen was this set of this grid.
Yeah.
And the frame would go in, and it was one layer. The art would go in, that was a different layer. And then the text would go in, and all you'd see was an X.
Right.
So you couldn't actually tell if it was the right words.
It wasn't state of the art by today's standards or even 10 years later standards of being able to see what the art actually looked like on the screen that would get printed. It was just a big
Yeah.
X.
Well,
And you
got
couldn't even tell
output.
things like, would the text fit in the box?
Right.
Yeah,
right.
there was some real sort of scary stuff about taking it and having to pay for the bureau to output. And
Right.
and then you'd see what was going on, and did you or did you not have time to fix it?
Right, and so for those of you who don't know, in those days, the process of printing cards was not entirely digital. It involved creating these files that were digital, but then for the printing process, the printer needed these color-separated films,
Yes.
and that it was printing those films
Yeah.
that we had the deadline
and
for.
they were smaller than the press sheet, so it was 4 quadrants per sheet. So Arabian Nights, there was 8 sets of films that had to be completed, which is one reason it's taken so long.
And they don't just compile like that either.
No, there's this process. And so he got to Friday night and they booted him out and he could come back first thing Saturday morning. But he wasn't done and the films had to be in Belgium by Monday morning.
Monday morning,
Belgium time. And so, they missed the FedEx deadline Friday, but, if they could make the FedEx deadline on Saturday, it was
there
all
was
going to be
a airport. You could go to the airport.
Yeah.
In those days, I don't know about now, but there,
this story gets better.
Okay,
This story gets better.
Okay, yeah.
So Dave asked, can he come over, because it's Friday night, and James and I lived with Phil and Kaya Folio in their
Two
house.
of the original Magic the Gathering artists, or
Well,
almost
Phil
original.
came in later. I had to convince him it would be an okay thing to do. I also hooked him up for the Robo Rally thing. I was like, you should do this.
Yeah.
So, but Kaya was in from the beginning.
Right.
And so we shared a house and we had poker nights on Friday. So everybody was coming over. I'm like, everybody's over. Dave, you can come on over. And he brought the computer and we took my sewing machine off of my sewing desk and put the computer on my sewing desk, and he's sitting there working, and he's obviously just exhausted. I mean, he's been up for days. And I finally was like, Dave, here. And I sat him on the floor, and I gave him a bowl of soup, and I said, tell me what to do. And it was like the last quadrant. It was like the eighth set of films. And I sat there, and I remember just the laser focus and the panic of like, this file goes on this picture, and this file. And just
Not big, because you had to make sure, because you couldn't see if it was really,
Yeah.
if you really got the right one.
And he went into the bureau, I think it was Saturday morning, and there, somewhere between Friday night and Saturday morning, we found out that like the file for, I think it was the Brass Man, had become corrupted. The art file was corrupted. And so he had to call Jesper, and Jesper had to find the original art in his desk drawer and go scan it again, and then like bring a disc over, it was just this crazy thing. But Saturday dragged on, and I was just at home doing whatever, and the FedEx deadline was missed, and they had to get an air courier to come get the films. I think it might have been on Sunday, but since the place was in Fremont and we lived in Ballard, the air courier came and got the films from our house to take them to Belgium.
And that's how Arabian Nights got made.
And I think there might have been like an error that crept through in there somewhere, but it wasn't the bit I did, I'm sure.
There was mana symbol issue. And
there was
some stuff like that.
Well, the heroic efforts it took, small company, limited money, doing
can.
things that none of us had done before, and in some cases hadn't been done by anybody before. Doing a game like Magic the Gathering with its, playing card quality cards, but sorted like trading cards. Yeah.
And art heavy.
And discs that weren't big enough to fit all this stuff. It was
Yeah.
crazy. Okay, so let's
So that happened, and,
Yeah.
and at the time I thought, well, I really hope they don't lose all my money. Because I kind of saw that little chaos up front, that there was this huge amount of work that had to be done, and so few people, and stretched so thin.
So the looking, how the sausage is made is never pretty, right?
And then it was, I think, towards the end of November that the payroll situation got straightened out, and then there was actual jobs to be had.
Right.
And it was like, give me one. And you're like, but I think it was you who said, well, but we need a salesperson. That's what we need right now. Do you do sales? And I had never done sales. I'd been a spokesmodel. I had given out ham at the women's show, But I was like, I am game for anything.
I'm
Just,
sure that sounded compelling to me.
let me get in there and get my hands on this. But I had accounting experience too, which was helpful because a lot of this was keeping track of pre-orders for product and how much product had customers actually gotten so far and how much did they still want, and
Well, I always came from the school that the most important quality you look for in a new employee is just intelligence, right? The experience is nice, the experience is good, right? But I kind of had the attitude, maybe I was giving myself permission to do the job I wasn't qualified
That's
for.
right. We all had to figure it out.
Right? Maybe some of that was going on, but clearly, to me, you were a really sharp person, right? Really
well,
intelligent
that's
person.
where everybody, we were all smart people flying by the seat of our pants.
That's right. It's like a kind of a cross between, like, they talk about getting dropped into the deep end of the pool. But it was a little more like getting dropped into a volcano. But we're all like, yeah, just keep paddling really hard and eventually, figure it out.
So you're hired to do sales.
So I'm hired to do sales.
So what's the first day like?
Okay, well, the first day, I came in and found that...
And who were you working for then?
I was working for Lisa.
Lisa Stevens, who was on our show.
Yeah, Lisa and Vic and I all shared a desk and a Mac Classic and a telephone. And I was like, okay then. And it was in the sort of...
oh my God, was this still in the house?
Yeah, it was in the house.
Yeah.
Oh,
it was, you went through the downstairs kitchen into that
yeah.
sort of rec room with the wood paneling.
Right.
And
we didn't have as many computers or desks or chairs as we had employees.
Yeah, a lot of people were working sort of from home. There was, like Jesper had a setup there, but he was usually, again, like, I think working from home. And would just come in with things.
Too.
Though there was that little board with the, like, Satan's little helper thing written on it.
It was welcome to Satan's little cottage of human suffering.
Oh, there we go. Yes. Okay, I knew somebody would remember. And
I had to edit it because he had the apostrophe in the wrong place in Lil.
So you had to edit it.
Lil, yeah.
Good.
I'm sorry, I just need to cut in here. Satan's what?
Satan's little cottage of human suffering.
And what was this?
It was just one of those little black
with
boards
white
that had the
letters.
little white letters you stick to it.
Yeah,
And it just said, welcome to Satan's
that was Wizards of the Coast equivalent of a motivational poster. Yes, yes.
I think it was the company motto, the internal unofficial company motto was,
we'll help you pass the
time until you die. and
Another Jesperism.
And I think Jesper also had this story of how to deal with bad phone calls, which was that you would suddenly yell, "Oh my God, he has a gun!" and bang the receiver on the desk. I don't know if anyone ever actually did that, but it was morale boosting to hear the instructions for how you
Jesper was a bright light at the office.
Yes, all these things sound so odd and but they were inspirational. I mean, for a company like us.
Yeah.
Well, and we were all
to be
punchy from
fun.
lack of sleep most of the time, so this sort of thing just was like, oh yeah, that's about our humor level,
Like
Exactly.
Christmas Eve, 1993. I left the house. I mean, the office was closed. You guys were upstairs, but like I left the office at 8:30 at night because I needed to fax order confirmations to every single distributor. And it was like a form and I'd filled them out and then I had to sit there waiting for them to roll through the fax machine, dialing these international numbers and waiting for it to confirm. But by God, I was not going to leave the office for if we had that week off without getting those order confirmations out. Dang it. Just like that, I deeply remember that. I'm like, oh, I'm going to get all these order confirmations out.
Right. Okay, so
back to the first day though. The first day I find out, we're sharing this desk and everything else, but I find out that it's not as much of a problem because people are working from home, people come in at various hours. The next day I came in bright and early at like 8 a.m. and have the desk to myself. And I kind of was like, well, when's Lisa gonna be in? And she worked a much later part of the day.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, well, here's a stack of phone messages that don't seem to have been replied to. But there's a stack of those little peel-off things with people's numbers.
Right.
So I picked up the phone.
Yeah.
And I just started calling all these people.
By the way, that is probably the most brilliant first day story for a salesperson. You may not have been trained as a salesperson, but your instincts were spot on. What do you do when you're in sales? You talk to your customers.
Yeah, and they taught me my job, really. I mean, I think that was the thing. I was like, okay, what do you need me to be doing here?
That's
It's
awesome.
sort of like I'm your advocate here at the company, and I got an earful because things had been so stretched. I mean, there was no product, and people wanted product, and I remember for the first few sets.
So this had to have been, by the way, the 94, because Magic didn't come out until 93.
But people had to order 4 months in advance.
Oh.
Remember? And so by the time the goods were actually shipping, it was not the quantity they wanted.
Okay.
So like Arabian Nights, the cutoff for ordering that had been back, before those films went to Belgium in October or something.
I'm the one that screwed up. Yes,
Yeah,
of course.
so
Yes,
this
93.
is December.
December comes after August.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
right.
so-
Okay.
So this is December, and the first wave of Arabian Nights was just shipping.
By the way, God help the person watching these shows who tries to put together the Wizard of the Coast timeline of events based on our comments.
We have no clue.
Yeah.
It happened sometime. I think it was in the old office.
Yeah, and that's where I was only in that old office for like 2 months. So for me,
So-
I can kind of like bookmark that part.
Do you remember any of those first day conversations with distributors?
Well, should I name the name because I love him dearly?
I think it's okay as long as you're not going to publicly shame them too bad.
No. But also, should I censor what he said to me?
Nah. We have an adult
what's
rating.
your rating?
We have an adult
Okay, you
rating.
have an adult rating. Okay. A dear friend of mine, Mr. Bob Carty,
Oh,
who
good.
is
Bob
now
Carty,
at
sure.
Creative Goods,
Yes.
and was at Mayfair and before that, but he was at Liberty Hobby in Florida.
Yes, that's right. Liberty,
And
Florida.
I called up, and I said, "Tell me what's going on. Tell me what I can do for you." And this was like the first person I called. And I then learned some new language. I had never heard in this order the words Royal Mongolian Clusterfuck. And I was like, oh, okay, so things are not going well, is how I understand. And then he was so apologetic. He was so apologetic because he realized he was just offloading on a poor innocent soul on the other end of the phone.
On
poor
the first
person.
day.
Yeah.
On the first day at work, second.
The poor
but my
person we
first
threw
full day
into
at
the
work.
line of fire.
But then he explained everything to me and was super
Right.
helpful, and we've been like good friends ever since. We have closed down many a bar, me and Bob Carty.
That's fantastic.
So yeah, I spent that week just calling people and trying to figure out who had ordered what and how much had they already gotten and how much did they still want of the things.
Right.
And we had that first wave of Arabian Nights shipped, but it was like only 80% of what had been ordered from Cartamundi, and somehow
Right.
that last 20% was super late. Didn't ship until like January. or
Yeah,
something.
now you
Yeah.
mentioned it. There was like a piece of Arabian Nights that came in late. I'd
And-
forgotten about that.
But they all
yeah.
got it for free, so I don't think they had too many complaints there when it finally got to them. But and
And they got it for free? What?
the last 20% of their order.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't do that. That decision was made before I got there
Oh, we gave it to him for free because it was late.
because it was late.
Well, that sounds like the sort of altruistic.
Yeah, it was a
Thing
sort of a
that I would have
comic
done in
book,
my
late
younger
shipping
years.
comic book kind of thing, and it was
So-
like, oh, we're so sorry. that
Carol,
this
how
was
did
late.
you win these people to your side? Because it sounds like
Charm,
part of the-
natural talent.
I mean, yeah, part of the order was missing. You know, they were really excited to get this new product, and it's your first day. You barely know anything about the company. This company's new.
Yeah.
What do you do?
Well, I just took down everything they told me, and I listened. I was just like put on my listening ears, and I'm like, okay, just tell me. Okay, I don't know about this. I'll have to look this up. I'll have to ask somebody, and back and forth the next few weeks were finding out all the things they wanted to know and calling them back and telling
That's
them
just-
news they often did not want to hear, but at least getting them a reply.
At least getting a reply.
'Cause
Well,
there was
letting them know that somebody at the company cared.
Yeah.
Solid career advice.
Yeah.
In general, right there. We're gonna start a new stream called Carol's Career Advice Show.
Yeah,
That's right.
for sure. I mean, it is like, for someone who didn't have professional sales training, the instincts were right on.
Yeah. Well, I had worked in many offices.
I did such a good job hiring you, yes.
I had worked in a lot of offices by then, and I kind of think the route of temping and contract work and short-term employment for 5 years prior to that, which is
Right.
really what I was coming out of. I had seen the inside of an advertising agency. I worked as the bookkeeper at the Seattle Rep for a few months. I'd
Right.
done a lot of things and heard a lot of different businesses trying to operate.
Right.
So I was just sort of like drawing.
Channeling all that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, so let's go into 1994, and we're like halfway through our time, and I know you got a lot of stories to say.
Well,
so,
one of the things I totally appreciate and love about my time at Wizards was all the travel I got to do.
yes.
Because I love traveling. And I had not gotten to do that much. I mean, I had lived overseas when I was a teenager, but you go and you live there and then you come back. I hadn't gotten to tour, hadn't gotten to see anything. My very first business trip. This is a good story. This is the one time my French literature degree came in handy. Because we had found out about the Paris Toy Fair, that there was such a thing as a Paris Toy Fair. And Kathleen decided we should go.
So we're probably sometime in 1994, maybe.
Yeah, this is like, well, this decision to go is made in January. The trip was in February. I mean, this is like bang.
Right after you got hired.
Yeah. And so Kathleen's like, we need to go to the Paris Toy Fair.
And Kathleen, you mean Kathleen Adkison?
Kathleen
who
Adkison.
was my wife at the time
Yeah.
and one of the co-founders of Wizard of the Coast.
And you know, she's like vice president. She's like, I'm going to go to the Paris Toy Fair. I need somebody to go with me who speaks French because I don't know French.
Right.
And there were 2 people on staff at that time who knew French, and it was me and Jana Wright. And I had a degree.
So that got you in on this
So
trip.
I got to go.
You got to go on the trip.
And so we were going to go to Paris for like 5 days, because by the time you go to Europe, you don't want to just turn around and come back. For sort of a long weekend, we went to the Paris Toy Fair, and it was fairly small. But Cartamundi had a booth there. And they
Who's
were,
our printer?
Who was
Our
our
Magic
printer.
Together.
And so we were spending time with them, and they said, we're really surprised you're here. And we were like, why? And they're like, well, because the Nuremberg Toy Fair is the biggest toy fair in the world, and it's next weekend.
Yeah. Why are you at this one and not
Why
that
are-
one when that one's bigger?
And they said, you should just change your ticket, and you should go to that. And so Kathleen called and said, hey, we're going to stay in Europe for another week. Hope that's okay. And I don't know who was dealing with our travel arrangements at the time, but they changed the tickets. And
I think
did
it was
all
our
the
neighbor,
things.
actually. Yeah. I mean, seriously, we had our neighbor just down the
Yeah.
street was a travel agent, did all the Wizard of the Coast travel for quite a while until at some
And
point.
got us a rental car,
Yeah.
which was a stick shift, because this was a rental car on short notice in France, and I don't drive a stick, so I didn't do any of the driving. But it was February, and we did, though. This is cool. We had time to go to Belgium in the meantime and go see the factory.
See Cartamundi.
So we went to Turnhout and stayed for a couple days.
I'm sure Luke took you to a nice dinner.
He did, and that was the funny thing, is he hadn't really said anything about it. We just said, oh yeah, we'll get there that night, and he had figured out where we were going to stay. Driving from Paris to Belgium, we stopped in a small town for lunch. This lunch in France. This is like dinner. It's like a 3-course meal. So we're sitting there, and we're like, is this? And they're like, no. Like, wait. It took us like 2.5, 3 hours to have lunch.
Yeah.
By the time we got to Belgium, it was like 8 o'clock at night, and Luke was just freaked out, because he's like, where are they?
Right.
Did they die?
How long does it take to drive here from Paris? And we came in, and he was like, well, we're going to have a late dinner. And we're like, okay, we're hungry again.
Sure.
And the place we were staying had this nice restaurant, and they served us pheasant. And we're like, wow. And it's like they bring it out with the silver
Cloche and everything,
cloche and do the thing. And we're like, oh, this is really, really good. And we get done, and they're like, oh, and it was a small place. They're like, oh, would you like seconds? And we're kind of like, well, it feels bad to turn down pheasants. So I have good memories of that trip to Belgium. And then we had to drive to Nuremberg in a blizzard, and with like no idea of where we were going to stay when we got there. And we had to stay overnight in a hotel somewhere mysterious between Belgium and Nuremberg. And we just follow the little signs with a bed on it, Just follow the signs, I have a bed. Eventually turn up at this place to find that no one there speaks English. No one.
And how's your German?
Well, and then I had this moment, because I'm like, wait. When I was in high school, me and my friends, we had conversational German at lunchtime for 6 months for fun. Do I remember anything? And I managed to come up with like, ein Zimmer für 2 Personen, bitte? And they're like, so they get us a room, and I'm like, wie viel kostet das? How much does it cost? And they're like, they tell me, and I understood it, and they said a whole bunch of words, and I'm like, Kathleen, one of those was breakfast. They feed us breakfast. And we thought, oh, that was terrible, but we got through it. We get to Nuremberg, a massive, massive place, and we're walking through the parking lot, and I got like this full body shiver, and it was the strangest thing. There's a canal, and there's this long, skinny parking lot, and I just sort of knew in my bones, though I didn't actually look this up until much later, that's the old parade ground.
Oh.
And I was just like, I suddenly had this like, oh I'm standing on some really weird history. But yes,
Yes.
so that was quite the thing. And then we go into the convention center and we say, we have nowhere to stay. We just showed up
Right.
at the biggest toy fair in the world. We have nowhere to stay.
But we represent Magic the Gathering.
Well, they didn't care about that, but they did have a little.
Not yet.
They had a little office that would help people, and they're like, we said, please just find us a hotel where they speak English because we're
Screwed.
no German, and they're like, sure, no problem at all. And they get us a place 27 kilometers away in Allersberg, and that night we got there. No one spoke a word of English. And I was like, well, I knew those 3 sentences from before, so we'll make. And we would, like the menus, we would just point.
Now, is this the Nuremberg where we met
Hasbro Europe.
Tom Dusenbury, I bet, maybe?
I don't remember who the gentleman was, but there was several folks from Hasbro
Right.
Europe, and Kathleen,
Yes.
very seriously told him that yes, indeed, the company was available because liquidity was a thing that we would all
Eventually, yeah.
we would all like.
Yeah.
And
Well, there was
price-
pressure already from shareholders to get some return on investment.
Yeah.
because their money had been tied up for like a
Even
year,
though we didn't end up selling the company for many years later, there was already interest. It was, well, and I remember Tom Dusenbury, who was a VP at Hasbro. It was shortly after that he called me and introduced himself and said that he had met my wife and a bunch of my employees at Nuremberg Toy Fair and said, just looking forward to buying you guys someday. It was just what he said.
when the time is right. But at the time, the quoted price was $5 million,
That's
which
funny.
wound up substantially lower.
Yeah. We held out for more. It's probably a smart decision.
Just a little bit. But they just thought, flash in the pan, fad, if you're
Right.
still around,
Right.
come back later. So, yeah.
So let's go up. Let's get into some of the stuff. In the summer of '94, as we're approaching Fallen Empires and going Magic set after Magic set.
Yeah.
With
And the first one we ever allocated was the Dark.
okay.
Because even Legends, we'd had a order cutoff, and we printed more than what they ordered. They spent the intervening however many months begging for more Legends, just begging for more Legends. And we're like, well, I think the Legends print run had partially been set based on ability to pay for it.
Yeah, I think there was a lot of the forecasting in those days was looking at the trends in the sales numbers and kind of saying, okay, well, clearly we didn't do enough of this set, so next set would do a little bit more. Arabian Nights was like 5 million
5 and
cards.
then 8 and then
And Antiquities was like 15 million, I
15,
think.
16,
and
yeah,
Legends
whatever
was
it
like
was.
35 or something like
yeah,
that.
and the pre-orders
and-
had been 32 million cards. I mean, we
Right.
did it all in millions of cards. I don't know. That was the way it was always
Yes,
done.
that's what we did. All
So
millions
they
of
had ordered
cards.
32 million cards, and when we set that print run, I'd only been at the company like a few weeks because it was still back at the house.
Right.
And Cardamundi had come for a meeting, and I was like, look, you guys, just as much as you can, and they would only, they could only give so much credit beyond
Right.
whatever, and we had pre-orders for
Yes.
32 million cards.
You're probably right.
Yeah.
The credit it was probably a combination of factors.
Like
How much
trying to
credit would they give
bootstrap.
us?
Well,
Yeah.
and
Well-
there was also press time because they were also still printing,
Probably
unlimited
unlimited.
and stuff like that.
Well,
that
and
we were also
fighting
people.
for press time with everybody else.
Yeah, exactly.
That was just regular
Yeah.
cards.
Well, we also had other card sets coming, other games like Jihad, later
Yeah,
Vampire.
that was
Trails
later.
Struggle.
That
Yeah.
was later. I mean, I have that in that.
Oh, the memo. Yes.
in
yes.
the memo from that summer.
Okay, I might. Yeah.
But yeah, the Legends print run, we were like, please, as much extra, and it was like, eh. And we're like, okay. So then I had every distributor trying to get their piece of those few, like we're like, oh, there's a safety margin, and we'll kind of spread it around to you guys, but it's not very much. And all of them, they just kept throwing more orders at us to show us how much they needed some of those extra Legends cards.
Right.
And we're like, yeah, okay, you get an extra case, you get an extra 2 cases, it was those sort of amounts. But that had sort of fed this frenzy, I think, of they were like, oh, there's not enough. And when we were going to do the Dark, I was like, we
Which
can't
Dark
do more
being
than.
so that's the next set after Legends,
Right.
fall 1994.
And we hadn't shipped Legends yet, but we had all those numbers of how much regular edition were we selling, and how well had like Antiquities hadn't done that great in the market. It had kind of been, it was okay. And I was like, don't do more than 64 million cards, I think it was, of the Dark.
Yep, that's about
And
right.
And we set that before the order deadline, and we let everybody know we got to allocate this because there's only so much product.
Now, by allocation, you mean because the orders that came in were more than...
Were going to be more than the
were
product
more
we
than
were making.
how much we were printing, and so
Yeah.
you were allocating. So how did you allocate product?
Well, at the time, we kind of did, there was this whole voodoo, and I remember, I mean, it was, a lot of this was like me and probably Ellie Howell and Ron Richardson, I think were like the key salespeople at the time. We would sit down and say, okay, how much business do these various distributors do with us? How big of a market do they serve? Occasionally we'd have to cut some product loose for somebody who was like in a developing market, like that we definitely knew not enough product was getting to Canada or not enough was getting to Australia or something like that. Be like, let's see if we can shift a few more cases over there. But then mostly trying to see, okay, who had sort of a historical pattern of, taking a lot of product. They got more.
Right,
and people who had just sort of Johnny come lately showed up and said, hey, I want some of this hot product. You're like, well, okay, we'll get you some. We'll get you some. And then it just sort of perpetuated from there.
Right.
And there were people trying to get higher allocations by hook or by crook.
Oh,
they
yeah.
wanted to be our best friends.
I'm sure they did.
And so I was like, okay, take all this with a grain of salt. But yeah, I had people buying me drinks because they thought that would get them a bigger allocation. And I'm like, no, that's thanks for the drinks.
Didn't Ellie at one point have an offer?
Yeah, she had some sort of joking, let's, see what's, how you feel about this, of like, we could buy you a car. I think there was like a down payment on a house. and she was like, oh, heck no. So yeah, she came and told me about this, and I'm like, yeah. And then also one of her customers they'd gone to the farmer's market on like the day after her sales meeting with them, and they were wanting to like buy her a present and just a little something. And I'm like, well, that ought to be okay because that's not going to sway our judgment. But then, yeah, I remember going to HR and saying, we should have a gift policy.
We should have a gift policy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like if it's over $25, you got to report it. You got to tell us. We got to say, hey, that's not cool or whatever. So,
Right.
so yeah, she got a hat.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was busy times, and people were calling and calling and calling, and we were
Lots.
keeping up with it and trying to keep them happy, and yet at the same time, I said, tell them news they did not want to hear, which is you're only going to get this much, and that led to then an outcry to print Fallen Empires to order, which still meant that 4 months ahead or whatever.
Right.
But they're like, whatever we order by that date, you got to promise to print it.
This is all set up for the Fallen Empires
Yeah.
challenge that you're painting a picture of the tremendous amount of pressure we were under to print more and more product, which of course led to us overprinting with Fallen Empires.
And I think like our allocation on the Dark wound up after the Dark shipped. People said, well, actually that was, maybe like it was enough to keep the value up. It didn't glut the market, but it also didn't completely starve the market either. It was kind of a reasonable amount of that product. But they'd still like already gone hard on like just buying a ton of Fallen Empires.
Yeah.
And didn't want to back down because their competitors would steal their customers.
Right. Yeah. It's a shame that in retrospect we
Well, how did we know?
yeah.
And honestly, if you hadn't given them everything they wanted, then they would have been mad about that too.
Yeah.
In a different way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. it's
Maybe
like-
less mad, but
Well, and eventually they didn't wind up getting everything that they ordered.
So you
It's another
also
story.
helped us get out of the hobby market and get into some of the more
yes.
broader mass market chains like Toys R Us, for example.
Toys R Us.
It doesn't exist anymore,
no.
but
Toys R Us had contacted us, I believe. I don't know that though I don't know, Ron might have contacted them. He was doing, he was very proactive and was kind of like looking for things. But they got a hold of us and they're like, oh yeah, we want to talk to you guys. And we're like, well, I don't know. We don't have enough product for our current customers because this was like late summer of '94. And we're like, we don't really have enough product, but let's talk anyway. So Ron and I went out to Paramus, New Jersey, to the headquarters, and we walked into their waiting room, and it was full of the most panic-stricken, scared, sweating salespeople you've ever seen. They had their sample cases. They had those old school, leather sample cases. And we could just tell, like, if these guys didn't make their sale to Toys R Us, like, their career was over, it was the end, like, their company was going to go. I mean, they were like, this is the most important meeting of my life. And Ron and I are like, we don't even want to sell to these people. So we're just kind of there and waiting for our turn to go, be admitted to see the purchasing manager. And we eventually get ushered in, and this person's like, well, we need you to give us electronic entree into your inventory system so that we can just have whatever product we want and that we can do this and do that. And we're just like, who do you think you're talking to? and they're all like, well, and you got to give us this huge discount, just this huge discount because we're Toys R Us. And we're like, we don't have enough product to sell to the people we already sell to. So, I don't know that we can sell you anything. And they're like, what? And the guy starts to get kind of panicky, and he calls in his superior, who was like some VP of purchasing, and they come in, and they're like, but you, and this is where Ron, who had the infamous pair of boots, which he had inherited from his grandfather. Ron had like the one pair of like dress shoes, and they were these cowboy boots. He leans back and he puts his feet up on this guy's desk.
Which is such a Ron thing to do.
Oh, it was a brilliant move. I mean, Ron had been like an actor, right? So I mean, his timing was impeccable. And I just sat there like basking in the glow. I was like, oh, I love you. And these people behind the desk, they got so rattled that they blurted out, and I don't remember if it was the VP or the manager, blurted out, but we have to buy your product. It's nationally advertised. And we're like, wait. So you have to buy our product. Well, these are our terms. Retailers get 50 off. Distributors get 60 off. You're a retailer. You get 50 off. But they're like, no, but we're Toys R Us. And we're like, and we care why?
You're not. It's not like you're going to be running tournaments in your store or all this stuff, all these extra services that the hobby retailers provide to us.
And eventually, they told us all this stuff, and they had their huge Bible of like all the big mass market people have this Bible they give you. That's every regulation and rule you have to follow to sell to them. And it has things like your outer cases have to have barcodes specific to that store, like for them, that you ship to them. And you have to do all this computer. And we're like, look, we can't do anything in the book here. And on top of that, they had a policy that they would charge damaged or unsaleable stuff back to the parent company,
the supplier.
And we're like, no. And so I gave them 1 percentage point. I said, you can get 51% off, but the minute it leaves my dock, it's yours. That's it. Non-returnable.
And they buy it?
Yeah.
They buy it.
They took that deal. And then I think it was the following Toy Fair, I was in New York. And by that time, the Magic gift set had come out, which was this, and that was a product like they could buy because they could put it on a shelf, and like they didn't have anywhere to sell the other stuff.
Right. Later they would fix that, but this is 1994.
So I went with, and Ron said he wasn't with me, so it was one of the other members of the sales team. But we decided to go into the Herald Square Toys R Us, see if we could find our product, and they had it shelved alphabetically with all the box games, so Monopoly. Magic the Gathering one. We're just like, okay. And there was this little stack of games just jammed on a shelf with all these other games. And every single box, the shrink wrap had been slit and the decks were missing. And I felt so smart at that exact moment. I was like, wow, I'm so glad they're not charging all of this product back to us.
Yeah, seriously.
And I went and tried to find a store manager to tell them they'd been robbed, and there was like nobody there, and like the clerk at the desk was like,
Oh my gosh.
Like,
I'm not getting paid enough to care.
All right, we have so many more stories, but we're getting close. I know you brought in some exhibits. So I think we have. What are we looking at here?
Yeah, so up on the screen right now, we've got the Diamond Gem Awards. Tell us about that.
Oh yeah, that was one of my early trips was in the summer of
And you're going to have to give the short version on these,
short
so we're not
version.
going to get through these.
So we are at this show, me and a few salespeople, and there's going to be this big banquet at night that's like the Gem Awards, and we're like, we're not going to go.
And it's fair to say, this is Diamond. This is in those days the comic book publisher.
Oh, yeah.
They were still, it was
in
them
New
and Cap City were still kind
okay.
of neck and neck. This was before all the
This
exclusives.
is the world of comics. This
But
is
big.
the channel distribution that pretty much thumbs its nose at games.
Yeah,
in
they
those
had not
days.
really come
Yeah.
into the game space.
Yeah,
but they
we didn't
did
take
have,
them too seriously.
Yeah, and they were huge, but they were all about comics. But we had gone and we had our booth and everything. So we are told by somebody, no, you guys have been nominated for an award. You need to be there. And we're like, oh. We go in massive ballroom, tables, dinner, the whole 9 yards. And somebody kind of nudges me and says, well, just in case, you really ought to have like a speech ready. And I'm like, what is going on here? And then, by God, there's the envelope. They come out on stage. I mean, it was like the Oscars. Only,
Right.
of course, most of these were comic book people. So they're mostly in like jeans and t-shirts with their company logo on there. But they read out the name. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And I'm like wearing a suit with like a skirt and heels, and I toddle up there and make some little short acceptance speech on behalf of the company and Richard Garfield and everything. And then afterwards, they had everybody come up with their awards and do the huge picture. And I was the only woman on the stage because the comic industry was like 100% dudes. And I was
Way to
like,
represent.
So I was front and center for Wizards because,
Nice.
Yeah.
A harbinger of what's to come.
Yes.
All right, what else we got?
Yeah.
We have what looks like an early sales catalog. Is that right?
Yeah, is it the 1994 catalog? Yeah.
With the
that was
castle on the
the
shore.
castle.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The old logo.
I love the old original Wizards of the Coast. We played around a lot with sort of a castle by
logo,
the
yeah.
shore variants, and then professional people came in and took over, and we got away from that.
But that was the first catalog I ever had to give out to people. So
Okay.
yeah,
So
so it's like this is like I have like the big box of memorabilia, and,
Right.
and that was in there. And I'm
So,
like,
so that was the WotC 90. Yeah. So
Yeah,
Did you
94.
type that up or prepare it? Or?
no.
You
It
just got
was
to give it up.
totally professional in the sense of like the marketing department did it. I mean,
Yeah,
there was by that time there was marketing, and
We
they did
probably
that.
edited it too.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, because from our role playing experience, we were actually pretty decent at making books. The catalog just a small book. So,
Yeah. It's got listings for. There's a little section in the front for Magic, and then all the other product lines behind.
Right.
Because there was other stuff to sell.
Right. What
Now
else? we
we've got, I think, Carol, it's the zine that you were writing right before you started Wizards of the
Yeah,
Coast.
Rat magazine.
Rat magazine.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it was because I drew cartoon rats, and so we decided to call this zine we published Rat, and it only ever had 3 issues, but it does have like one of the earliest ads for Magic the Gathering in it because you guys bought ads, thank you.
Yes.
And that was before I worked at the company. They're like, here, but I drew the ad, so,
Right.
because gotta keep costs down.
Rats
just to
playing
keep-
Magic.
And just to keep with the theme, didn't you do an article with a picture of a plague rat or something?
Yeah, the second issue, we got Richard Garfield to write up designer notes for Magic as an
wow.
article, and then we used the plague rats as the illustration for that. And he one time gave me a plague rat card, and he used to change the rules for
Yes,
people, and then it
yes.
was official. If
Right.
Richard did it,
Right.
it was official. And plague rats are power and toughness equal to
The number of plague rats in
in play. And he crossed out part of it and wrote that are not in play. For example, this one is like 9999/9999. And I don't know what happened to that card, but
Oh
man,
my God.
I
The number of plague rats not in
Yeah,
play. Oh, that's
all the
perfect.
number
What
of
else we
plague
got,
rats not in play.
Kristen?
We have, I think it's a door sign with magic art on it of you,
yeah,
Carol.
yeah, that's
That's
me as
my
Rubinia Soul
favorite.
Singer. Yeah.
Yes.
And that was the original art was going to be for Titania, Queen of the Fairies, but then all the sort of Shakespeare got taken out and original names were put on them,
And you modeled for that piece
yeah,
of art?
for Rob Alexander,
For Rob
because it was
Alexander.
sort of a last-minute art commission, and we were at some convention, and he was like, "Carol, you model here," and we went up, and his wife helped me like drape some bolt of fabric around myself, and then he took a snapshot, and then like later that art was in Legend, so I got to be a legend.
Yeah.
And that was so
Aw.
cool.
Nice.
But yeah, that was my door sign from my office in the old sales
Right.
building.
Right.
that I brought in.
Right.
And now we have a lovely picture of Peter from, I believe, 1993.
Yeah, or it was late '93,
The-
early '94.
The picture was from your wedding, though, wasn't
Oh,
it?
I
was
think
it?
so.
Which would have been
Might
90.
90.
But the
Yeah.
The caption,
Yeah.
it's from
Yeah.
the 1994 Norwestcon program book.
That's right. That's right.
And then a similar picture of Beverly.
Oh
Yes.
boy.
Yes.
Yes.
Were you wearing like a jean jacket or
Yeah,
something?
yeah.
Yeah, look
Yeah,
all
and
sporty.
I still had a mullet, which was scary.
Sporty Spies.
Well, I think a lot of us had mullets in those days. I remember
Yeah.
James and I had like matching mullets at one time.
Well, Rick and I did too. Only his was longer than mine.
Yeah, he has really long hair.
Is that it? That's all?
Yeah, those are the things.
Do we have any questions from you or anybody else? All right, we got time for maybe one more story.
Oh, God.
There's so-
Well, and also, we want to let her tell us
y-
what,
y-
what she's doing now, too.
yes. We got
So
time.
we've
for
got to
that,
get it all in there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, let's just go to that because that'll give you extra time on
Okay.
that. Yeah, tell us about life in 2019 for Carol Monahan.
Well, I've spent, I did a bunch of things in the meantime, including like having and raising my child who is now 17. And that's been time consuming. But the last few years,
But rewarding, I hope.
yes, ever since sort of the Kickstarter explosion, like we started Cheap Ass Games back up, which is my husband's company, which then became our company because I was again like, okay, I'm here, grab hold of this. And we did a series like I think 11 Kickstarters. So yeah, I got very good at that, and we just licensed off that product line to Greater Than Games in St. Louis, and they are taking on all the publishing for that, and I love them.
Great.
And so
Now, who is that again?
Greater Than Games. and
Greater Than Games.
Yeah, they do
Okay,
Sentinels
so
of the Multiverse.
plug for Greater Than Games.
Spirit Island,
Yes.
and now they do Kill Dr. Lucky and Unexploded Cow.
Which I got to say is a really great game.
It's a great game. And they also are publishing, James wrote a retrospective of Cheap Ass Games, 22-year history of Cheap Ass Games in a 656-page book. Has all the rule books for all the games in it, and then little stories about each one. So that's going to be coming out through Greater Than, and of course first to our Kickstarter backers, because we had to do it that way because that's how we do things now in this modern age.
So if you've turned over the publication to Greater Than Games and James is designing, does that mean you're free to go
I'm
back
sort
to
of like his
theater, modeling?
Yeah, I mean, I'm like his agent. Like if somebody
Yes.
wants him to design a game, I'll probably wind up involved with that. But I'm looking to, I've been talking to a few other friends in the industry who maybe have projects or maybe want to do a thing, and I'm like, call me. So yeah, we'll see. But I'm looking forward to not having the pressure of doing it all on the logistics, sales, accounting, that whole side, which I had been in charge of. I'm like, yeah, time to take a breather again. Yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe 5 or 6 years is about my limit with a company. I'm like, okay, can I do something else for a while?
Well, I gotta say, if anybody wants, if anybody's looking for help, if somebody who's
Seriously.
25-year industry veteran,
Yeah,
26-year
it's
industry
'cause-
veteran who's done just about every job you can think of in a
She'll
company.
get you into Toys R Us.
Yeah, who knows? This is good.
I know. I know.
I'll tell you the horror stories, that's for sure.
Hire you for a job and keep your employees entertained at story hour.
That's right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
Yeah.
thank you.
Well, thank you for
Sure.
having me on the show.
Yeah.
This is fun.
Absolutely.
It's a
Absolutely.
good time.
Yes. So that's another episode of Fireside with Peter Adkison. Thank you very much to Carol Monahan for being our guest today.
Yay.
Thank you to Beverly Marshall Sailing, our co-host. Thank you to Christine Jensen as our director and managing our press and helping with the questions from the audience or whatever we need. And Will Geisler, who is our technical support, managing the cameras back there and get everything switched around. We will not be back next week on July 3rd. We're going to be playing games instead. Might see you on Gen Con TV through streaming of games. Not quite sure how that's going to happen. If it's going to happen, I'm getting the no from Kristen. So maybe I won't be. But Fireside with Peter Adkison, we will be back on July 10th, where our guest will be Mark Rosewater, who is been involved with Magic the Gathering since the very early days and still is. If you know Magic, you probably know Mark Rosewater. So please come back and see that. In the meantime, you can catch Table Takes Fridays at 11 a.m. Pacific Time and Brothers Murph on Mondays at 5 p.m. Pacific Time. All right, that's it. Signing off from Gen Con TV, Fireside with Peter Adkison. Thank you all for coming and watching us. Bye.